Hey guys, it's Alex. So this video is going to be called Sun Lady Tales, and this is going to be a companion video piece for an article that I wrote on my website, and by the time you see this video, the article will be already posted on my website. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, I am an author of a website that I've been working on, or have been working on, for the last 8 or 9 years, called theani.com. And I'm also a co-author for a book that I co-wrote with Tracy Twyman, who recently passed away last year in summer 2019. And that book was called Baphomet Temple Mystery Unveiled. So that was about the Knights Templar and the idol that they worshipped. But this video isn't really about that. This is more about some of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about, not just in this video, but also in my book called The Sun Lady Unveiled, which is scheduled to come out later this year, if all goes well. So yeah, I definitely realized it's been a while since I'd done a video on anything that pertains to this kind of subject matter. And as you have seen, I've been working on a lot of different mixes and whatnot for my YouTube channel, but hopefully I'll change things around and make more videos geared towards this kind of subject matter. So without further ado, let's just move on to the article. So I'm going to read this here real quick. So it says, this is a chapter taken from my upcoming book, The Sun Lady Unveiled. I also did cut it out for book length purposes and edited for online publication. And then I also wrote, what I am about to detail here is not a condoning of occult magic, but I do think it's worth pointing out this material to educate the public or general public on this esoteric hidden knowledge. I would like to think of this as a continuation of Tracy Twyman's research into the Grail mysteries for the public in some form, because I think ultimately that is what she wanted, for others to make contributions to this wellspring of knowledge. And that's basically true, because I've heard comments from Tracy when she was alive that she wanted others to also participate in what they find in their research. So I like to think of this as more like of me doing just that. So this is more like a dedication to Tracy Twyman's research. And there's a lot of other videos and articles out there on internet land that talk about all the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. But I won't get into that here in this video. Although I do address it a little bit in the article, so you can read that for yourself when this article is published. And I'm also making this video because there's so much going on right now in the news, and I almost feel like we really are living in the Book of Revelation. To be honest, the seals have already been opened according to the scrolls of Revelation, or the scrolls have been opened, the seals have been unsealed. In other words, we're heading towards a very strange yet exciting time. So anyway, let's just move on to the article. So this is an image I found that definitely encapsulates what I'm going to be discussing in this video. It comes from, this quote here comes from Carl Jung in his red book, Liber Novus. But I'll just start off here. So I was first writing in this article about Jesus' sacrifice on the cross and his connection with the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, because Jesus himself is considered to be a tree of life, right? but he was also hung on the tree of knowledge. And I'll explain why that is in a moment here. So, I mean, I'm not going to read everything word for word, but I'm basically just going to touch on some of the highlights of this article for this video. So I'm going to read this quote here. So it's from the Gospel of Philip. It says, "In the place where I will eat all things is the tree of knowledge. That one killed Adam, but here the knowledge, or the tree of knowledge, made men alive. The law was a tree. It has the power to give the knowledge of good and evil. It neither removed him from evil nor did it set him in the good, but it created death for those who ate of it. For when he said, 'Eat this and do not eat that,' it became the beginning of death." So in other words, the author of this passage, of the Gospel of Philip, was saying that the law was given by lesser powers, and but they conflate the law with the tree of knowledge. And if you read cabalistic interpretations of Genesis, they say that the tree of knowledge, or consuming the fruit, the tree of knowledge, was really the beginning of sexuality, birth and death, right? So that's how birth and death came into being, when both Adam and Eve ate fruit from the tree of knowledge. And according to Kabbalistic interpretations of it, it's a very strong sexual undertone to that, of knowledge, because in the Bible, to know someone also means to have sex with them. So there's definitely a strong sexual theme going on here as well. But so let's just move on here. So there's definitely a connection that's going to be made later on. And there's an image that I found online. Well, it comes from the Book of Hours, which is a medieval prayer book, but this is an image of Jesus being hung on a tree, or crucified on a tree. And what's interesting about this version of the crucifixion is that not only is he being hung on a tree, but there's also these fruit, right? And this image directly correlates to the Greek story of Hercules wrestling and killing the snake, or the dragon, who guards the tree of immortality in the garden of Hesperides, which was created by Hera and Zeus. Then you have the cabalistic tree of life up there. Then there's the sun, looks very small. It's actually in front of the landscape here. And then you have these revelers, these Renaissance revelers, dancing around, prancing. And then there's looks like a portal to the underworld, with the evil spirits flying in. So very, very interesting image here. But now next, I wrote how Christ was considered one of these first fruits, right? He's part of the true vine, as the Gospel of John puts it. That he redeemed us from the curse of the law, have become a curse for us. Cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree, or hangs on a tree. And that's a very loaded statement as well, because when Jesus released us from the curse of the law, I think Paul is basically connecting the law with the intermediary angels that gave the law to Moses. That's also in Galatians as well, or the lawgiver, right? Which is a code name for the demiurge. And that these angels were basically the lackeys and henchmen of the demiurge. So Paul, I mean, he doesn't really explicitly say it in Galatians, uh, but he seems to insinuate that idea. Now, and of course, the tree of life uh, is very much apparent throughout the Bible, from Genesis rather, all the way to throughout the Bible, all the way to the book of Revelation. And at the end of Revelation, we see the tree of life again appear in the New Jerusalem, or the cubical city that descends from the heavens at the end of the apocalypse. So everything that's contained within this cubical city is saved, right? And within this cubical city, the New Jerusalem, or the bride of God, contains what is saved from and regenerated from the previous universe. And everything outside this cubical city is basically destroyed in the lake of fire. And then I was explaining that the tree of life is, of course, a very an occult cabalistic glyph or symbol that comes from Babylonian and Assyrian myths and stories and practices, which were eventually adapted by the Jews when they were exiled in Babylon. But I think even before that, there's a lot of occultism going on in Judaism. You even see this with Moses and Aaron with their rods turning into snakes. In Numbers, I mean, you even have this idea of the Tushan, the serpent that, or everyone that looked at that bronze serpent was healed by their afflictions by other serpents. So anyway, so I was saying here that the tree of life, is really not just the biblical symbol, but is also basically a map of the universe, and that there are multiple versions of this map of the universe, which is made up of 10 spheres and 22 paths, right, in the cabalistic tree of life. And then I was writing here that when Moses encountered God, that he may have was actually tripping out and consumed DMT when he experienced the burning bush. And you can read more about that in that article, that site. And then there's this interesting factoid that I also put in here, that the Kabbalistic tree of life is also similar to what Simon Magus taught, and Simon Magus precedes or comes before, at least our version of the tree of life. And he taught the great tree of fire that continually burns, and that this tree of life has two aspects: one that is potential or intelligible, and the other is more kinetic or energetic or sensible, right? And that this tree is basically a symbolic manifestation of what the Gnostics call the pleroma, right? And just multiple aeons. You can read that. And what Simon taught was also very similar to what his teacher taught him as well, who was, of course, St. John the Baptist, as you read in the Clementine homilies. And then you also have this idea of Christ being the true vine that connects to, of course, the tree of life, and then there's the vineyard in Isaiah that the Lord waters and keeps. And then later on, I also wrote that Simon Magus who was a magician, by the way, and he was also considered to be the fountain or fount or father of all Gnostic heresies, according to the church fathers. That he was also, well, he called himself the Alpha and the Omega, and that title, of course, comes from Revelation. But that also is a title that can be ascribed to Ion, which is a Mithraic lion-headed deity or lion-headed god, which definitely connects to not only Mithras but also Saturn, and the Demiurge as well. And I discussed that in this essay. Uh, so let's just move on here. And then I found a really interesting image of Jesus being crucified on the tree of life. And his feet are resting on Malkuth, the kingdom, and then his arms are stretched out, crucified on Gabur and Chesed beneath Dath. And then there's another image that looks very similar to that with Adam Kadmon, and he's sort of like chilling out. I don't think he's crucified, but he's basically standing on Malkuth on this tree of life. Then you have the white Jehovah directly beneath him. So basically, Adam Kadmon is like an emanation of God, or the heavenly Adam. And that story can also be found in the Hermetica as well. And I think it's in the Apocryphon of John as well. He's called the immortal man. The immortal man of light, if I'm not mistaken. But then you have Hokmah and Binah, and Hokmah in earlier cabalistic traditions, he's called, or he's considered to be male, rather, and Binah is female. Whereas in later cabalistic traditions, like you see in the Hermetic Kabbalah, for example, is actually the opposite. Hokmah is female and Binah is male. It's just interesting how that differentiation comes about. And then I was writing here that I was pointing out how their bodies are stretched out as a symbol of a Y. That there's a Y symbolism going on here, and that's actually important to the mystery schools. Actually, I was surprised to find in regards to the letter Y. And so, and we basically going to learn why that the letter Y connects to the Pythagorean mysteries, as we're going to see in a moment here. And then I was writing here in this section that Jesus, according to these Peratic Gnostics, which Hippolytus, who was a church father in the Refutation of All Heresies, he wrote that that Jesus contained within him all the potentialities of existence, that he contained within him the fullness of the Godhead bodily, as Colossians tells us, according to Paul. And those basically, he contained within him the three natures: spirit, soul, and flesh, matter, the animal nature. So, and that connects also to the parable of the sower, you see in Matthew as well. You know, with the different seeds having three different fates, right? You have the seeds being thrown by the sower into the ground, where the good ground, and the other seeds are thrown where the birds eat, or the birds eat those seeds, and then the other seeds are thrown into the thorns, basically. So those are the three natures, and also Paul and even Plato spoke of a similar doctrine, the threefold nature of existence. And of course, the Gnostics took that further and said that some people were immortal, spiritual, others were psychic or soulish. They're kind of going back and forth between the light, the spiritual, and the dark, and the material. And of course, there's the highlight of the matter. And then I was writing here that Hippolytus, in a refutation of all heresies, he claimed that there was a Gnostic heretic by the name of Justinus. And I mean, we really don't know much about this guy Justinus outside of Hippolytus, so he's the only guy that really mentions him. But he wrote a book called the Book of Baruch, which claims that the Tree of Life was named after the male angel Baruch, and the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil is named after or connects to the snake angel Nas. And of course, Nas is a term that a Gnostic group called the Nassenes also call themselves. And the reason why they did that is because they saw the serpent of Genesis and also Christ as one and the same. And they also connected, obviously, to Numbers, where the bronze serpent that's raised. And then, of course, the Gospel of John talks about that as well, where at least Jesus conflates himself, the Son of Man, with the rising of the serpent. And of course, there's the whole Kundalini sort of subtext there as well. But I'm not going to get into that now. But anyway, this is basically sort of the crux of my argument here, or what I'm trying to say in this at least in this part of the essay. So I was saying that there's also this cabalistic idea of the crooked or slant serpent that slithers down on the tree of life. And then I wrote that I think this connects to the idea that the cabalistic tree of life is really the tree of knowledge of good and evil. After all, both the tree of life diagram and the tree of death look exactly the same. This also connects back to the concept of Jesus being hung on a tree while redeeming mankind from the curse of the law of the cross, much like how the alchemical serpent is said to be crucified on a cross. In Golden Dawn diagrams, the flaming sword of God that acted as a barrier between the true tree of life and Adam and Eve also serves as a barrier of the supernal Eden from the created world, as we will see later. And we're going to take a look at those diagrams in a moment here. But before we do that, I do want to point out that at least what I think, what Paul was saying, is that Jesus was saying, or at least he was saying, that Jesus redeemed us from the curse of the law, at least the satanic or corrupted elements of the law, which was done, according to some people, under the Second Temple form of Judaism, which became very occultic for its time. They're basically Kabbalists and all Talmud Jews and Pharisees and Sadducees, etc. And those are the guys, the religious authorities that Jesus pretty much condemned as children of the devil, as you read in the Gospel of John. But anyway, and then there's an image that I found that looks very similar to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. And I know it looks pretty blurry in this version, so let's just take a look at a much clearer version of it. So this is an O-Fi diagram of the universe, and the only reason why I even point this out, it reminds me of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. So this is a reconstruction of the O-Fi diagram that Origen, who was a church father, he talks about in his series of books called Contra Celsus, or Against Celsus. And Celsus was a pagan philosopher, a Roman philosopher, but he wrote a book against Christianity, and but in that book he also seems to conflate the Christians with these Ophite Gnostics. So he thinks that the Christians were basically a secret society made up of sorcerers. So then he makes all kinds of other claims in that book as well, that Jesus was born of a Roman soldier named Panthera or something, and that Mary was basically a hooker. But anyway, so this is the Ophite map. So you have these two circles which contain the different archons that rule over the seven heavens. And according to Celsus and Origen, that the Ophite initiates were said to make specific prayers and memorize each of the archons' names in each heaven as they ascend to the highest God. So then you have, Michael is one of these archons. He's depicted as a lion. And Michael, interestingly enough, he is an archon, and according to the Ophites, he basically belongs to the same club as Samael. And of course, Michael is one of the angelic saints in Christianity, and obviously he appears in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, and which I, definitely dissect, and I discuss Michael in depth, actually, and I compare him to other figures like Mithras, and even Zoroaster and Enoch, and Metatron. So I talk about all that in the book. But anyway, and then you have these other different archons as well. There's Siriel, there's Raphael, there's Gabriel. A little bit closer here. Then there's Tantabael, and then there's can't even read that. Then there's another archon here, and then if you go up higher, and then you have these different higher archons. Here's Adonai and Yaldabaoth, Iyal, Sabaoth, Asaphanas. There's Eleo and Ariel, and these archons, these archonic angels, are ruled over by Behemoth, or under Behemoth, and they're the ones who rule over our world, by the way. And then there's Leviathan. He's the same as the crooked serpent, basically. You read in Isaiah with Yahweh fighting or slaying Leviathan, right? The sea serpent. He's the same as Ouroboros. And then you have the flaming sword that prevents everything that's contained in this lower realm from escaping into the higher realm, which the aeons exist in harmony. So let's take a look at another version of this, so you have a better sense of what these Ophite Gnostics are talking about. So here's the Greek version of it. So let's go back here. So here's a simpler version of the Ophite diagram. There's a Father and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which is, of course, very Christian. And then there's life, knowledge, prudence, love, and wisdom. And there's the gates of paradise. And there's the flaming sword that prevents everything that's here from going into here, right? The seven heavens. And there's in another Gnostic text, I think there's the Apocalypse of Paul talks about the seven heavens, right? And the God of Israel who rules over the seven heavens. But in the 8th and 9th realm, in the 10th realm, that's where the true God is, or the hidden God, and the Logos and His Son, which would exist in perfect harmony, the kingdom of God. Here's another version of the Ophite map here, Tartaros. behemoth, the different planets, planetary archons. And then, let's see here. Here's another version of it, too. Paradise, again, just Baruch, as like kind of we saw earlier. And there's Nos, the serpent, tree of the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge here. And there's the sword, flaming sword and cross. Then there's the Leviathan, world soul that surrounds the earth and Tartarus. Anyway, let's just go back to the essay. And I discussed all the how it all works here. So I was saying that it's very similar to how the cabalistic tree of life functions, and it says that all these concepts are reflected in Origen's Contra Kelsum, in which he discusses the Ophi diagram. And then it says that the flaming sword guards the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, and if the sword was above the black line of Tartarus, and the tree of knowledge and life has a series of circles that starts from Behemoth and Leviathan to Gnosis and Sophia, leading to the circle of life to the Father. So this could be like the cabalistic number of 777 as a sum of the paths of the lightning path of creation. So basically, in other words, in the cabalistic tree of life, the light from the supernal Eden or Ein Sof descends down to different Sephirah of the tree of life. And then I was writing here that in Valentinian myths, they also spoke of a limit or horos that prevented from everything from below from entering into the pleroma, or the heavenly temple. And then I found this quote I found really interesting here. And I keep finding people saying that at the end of the time, that the elect will eat the flesh of Leviathan, but actually it's the opposite. And it comes from a website called Bitter Waters. And I quote that, and I cite everything cited here, but it says here, the Bible declares that Leviathan dwells in the midst of the ocean. Leviathan flees from before God, who casts it into the sea as a debased creature to be mocked in the midst of the waters. Leviathan and his companion Behemoth, which we shall see is her seed, are the ultimate examples of might and power upon the earth, and God's judgment and slaying of them are the supreme demonstration of his power to all the world. As such, Leviathan and his companion Behemoth play critical roles in the end times. They are key features of the dinner supper of the damned at the final judgment. Damned shall feast upon their flesh. This is the contrast to the marriage supper of the righteous who are saved. They spiritually partake of the flesh of the Messiah, and they enter his kingdom as his bride. So that's going on here. So a lot of interesting stuff there. That very packed paragraph. So basically, again, it connects to the idea that I think it's in Matthew again that there's this worm in the underworld, the worm dieth not. So it kind of reminds me of that passage. But anyway, and then we also see that actually, let's just go back to what I was saying earlier with the why. This why symbol. So in the mystery schools, the why is important because it basically encapsulates the saying that there's this path of vice and the path of virtue, right? And now in the Old Testament, it talks about this this process of salvation, right? Because according to the Bible, salvation isn't really instantaneous. It's really more of a process that takes place over time. So basically, it's an inward journey until union with God is realized. And Malachi has a very interesting way of saying it. So it says, "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord, whom ye seek, shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. But who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness." So basically, this connects with the idea, according to the mystery schools, that you have to basically die in order to live. You have to undergo the baptism of fire to receive eternal life. So I was writing here that that this death is a spiritual one, where the soul undergoes sort of a night descent, or a night journey, the night of the soul, or the dark night of the soul, rather, that St. John of the Cross talks about. And then eventually that soul is resurrected from his soul death. And that idea appears in Plutarch's writings. So he talks about mystery school's rite of initiation. This is spiritual alchemy, basically. So basically, he says that thus we say that the soul that has passed nither is dead, having regard to its complete change and conversion. In this world, it is without knowledge except when it is already at the point of death. But when that time comes, it has an experience like that of men who are undergoing initiation into great mysteries. So the verbs to die and to be initiated and the actions they denote have a similarity. So in the beginning, there is straying and wandering, the weariness of running this way and that, the nervous journeys through darkness that reach no goal. Then immediately before the consummation, every possible terror, shivering and trembling and sweating and amazement. But this is a marvelous light meets the wanderer in open country and meadow lands. Welcome him in that place where there are voices and dancing and the solemn majesty of the sacred music and holy visions. And amidst these he walks at large in new freedom, now perfect and holy, fully initiated, celebrating the sacred rites, a garland upon his head, and converses with pure and holy men. He surveys the uninitiated, unpurified mob here on earth, the mob of living men who, herded together in murk and deep mire, trample one another, and the fear of death cling to their ills, since they disbelieve in the blessings of the other world. For the soul's entanglement with the body and the confinement in it are against nature, as you may discern from this. So, and then it goes on. Well, what I write, I basically say that I connect that what we just read with this Y letter, and that there's these two paths that Jesus also talks about. The gate with these two gateways, the narrow gate and the broad way. And this also appears again in the Egyptian mysteries, where his entrance was conformed to the letter of the Y, the two paths of Pythagoras, the broad and narrow way of the Greek mysteries. And that actually originates from the Great Pyramids of Egypt, actually. And we'll get to see that here in a moment here. And this is the Pythagorean Y, which is here's a little maxim here, where it says, the Pythagorean letter two-way spread shows the two paths in which men life man's life is led. The right-hand track to sacred virtue tends, if steep and rough at first, and rest it ends. The other broad, smooth, but from its crown, on rocks the traveller is rumbled down. He who to virtue by harsh toil aspires, subduing pain's worth and renown acquires. But who seeks slothful luxury and flies, the labour of great acts dishonour dies. So, and that Y image uh, is also come from, that saying can also be found in Xenophon's Choice of Hercules. Because Xenophon, he narrates how Hercules, in his youth, had to choose between those two ways of being, the path of virtue and the path of vice. And that mirrors, in a way, the narrow way and the broad way in Matthew 7 from the Sermon on the Mount. And then I also mentioned about the Great Pyramids of Egypt and how they also had this going on with them. And that they were also built by, according to Josephus in the life of Adam and Eve, that they were built by the children of Seth, the line of Seth. And so they had a pillar of stone and a pillar of clay. So these two pillars, kind of like Yalkin and Boaz, the Temple of Solomon. And then, well, I'm not going to read everything word for word here, but, and then I was talking about in this section about completion, right? Like the process of salvation is like basically you can compare it to building a temple, right? So it's not something that's instantaneous. It gradually happens over time. Because the more you investigate, the more you seek, the more you knock, the more searching you do, the more that will come into fruition, the more that will be realized. And that's basically the will of God. That's what Jesus actually commanded everyone to do, to seek after not only God, but seek after wisdom. That's in Proverbs, that's in Psalms, right? But I want to skip a little bit towards the middle of this essay. I'm not going to read everything word for word, so I'm going to go ahead and go towards the middle of this essay. Not that none of this is important, but I do want to touch on some themes that I was talking about earlier about the cabalistic tree of life. So let's see here. Okay, so here's the this Golden Dawn diagram that I mentioned earlier. So here's an image of the woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, the Virgin. Then she looks like, or he looks more androgynous than he does female, actually, because there's no breasts. There's some wings and there's a white garment. And then this figure is also holding the sun. So this is basically God, but also the Virgin, the Queen of Heaven, and God at the same time, so to speak. Sort of like a hermaphrodite in a way, androgynous. And then you have these two pillars, the alchemy Boaz, which is being held up by Eve. And doesn't look like she's having much fun there, holding up these two pillars. And then above her, she's also holding up Adam. He looks like an old man here. So it's interesting. He looks like he's about to pee. And then with his two legs being crossed there. And then there's the great dragon beneath Eve, which connects to the prophecy from Genesis, where God curses the serpent, where He tells the serpent that the seed of Eve will always be crushing his head, and that the serpent will be always biting their heel. Right? Well, kind of looks like an egg. So this is Malkuth. This is the kingdom of Satan. The great red dragon is Satan, and he supports all of existence. And so I wrote here. Also notice in the above diagram, the seven-headed dragon, of course, Satan holds very existence at the very bottom. The Malkuth kingdom level of existence, the passive way to the kingdom of death, or the cliff hoth, and that's where the demons of the underworld dwell. And this is the punishment that he must endure. Malkuth is essentially the kingdom of Satan, as I just said. And then the same author, now I get this from an article called The Origins of the Cabalistic Tradition of the Golden Dawn from Thomas Sesewis, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But basically, the main purpose for Jesus' incarnation in Kabbalistic terms means that the creation below the abyss is in a hopeless condition that can only be restored by a messianic figure. This is a reference to the new Adam in the philosophy of the Golden Dawn, which is said to be able to reclaim his throne in the Tifrath and to rule with his rod of iron, a clear reference to the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation. The Messiah is the offspring of the fatherly Chokmah and the motherly Binah. And so basically, Christ, or the Messiah, he descended into the flesh, the abyss of the world, to hell, behind enemy lines, to rescue, on a rescue mission to save the children of Adam, right? The fallen light sparks in Kabbalistic terms that spread out in the abyss. So it says here, he is, according to Nathan, the holy serpent, which subdues the serpents of the abyss, which reminds us of the numerical concordance between the word Messiah and the anointed and Natash, serpent. So there you have that serpent-Jesus connection. Again. And then I wrote here that the view of such dark, chaotic, and even infernal forces as fundamental to the physical world is a very Gnostic one. Gnosticism, the Hermetica, and the Kabbalah teach that the physical world as we know it came about only after Adam Kadamon's fall from the celestial Eden. The physical world of suffering in this view is a cross-pollination of divine light and earthly demonic shells that attempt to obscure it. The concept of the end times, of course, is the reversal of Adam's fall and the re-evaluation of the world back to the celestial paradise. And then I also connect here Adam Kadmon with Saturn, actually. Because I wrote here that Adam Kadmon, he too is both the celestial incarnation of Ein Sof, the alien god, who in Platonic and Mithraism can also be equated with Ion, like I mentioned earlier. And Ion is the hypercosmic Leantocephaline, the winged lion-headed male figure whose new torso is intertwined with serpents, or with a serpent who typically holds a scepter, keys, or a thunderbolt. And here, just go look at that image here real quick before we skip down again. So, there he is. There's our guy, Ion. And then let's just skip down here real quick. So this is an image that I also found that pertains to what we're just talking about. This is the crooked serpent that slithers on the tree of life, right? Or the so-called tree of life. And really, I think this is really the tree of knowledge, because the Kabbalah is really just, a Jewish form of occult religion. And then, the Kabbalah is the basis of all the mystery school religions, of all the modern mystery schools, that is, like, the Golden Dawn, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, the OTO. I mean, they all basically are involved in the same thing, just with minor differences and trappings. But they're pretty much involved in the same sort of esoteric, Luciferian, occult magic. That sort of thing will, I think, in my opinion, only bring about ruin and darkness into your life. And as you may have seen on my videos or previous videos, a lot of those were about the occult, and that's not something I really feel to be wholesome now. And now, I mean, I really don't feel like I'm even Gnostic anymore. I really don't consider myself as such, even though I am talking about all these ideas. But I'm more of an independent researcher nowadays. I like to think of myself as such with Christian sympathies. So I definitely do believe in Jesus Christ, and I try to live a life that's in accordance with the narrow way, right? Even though sometimes I screw up here and there, but that's how life is, right? But it's all about repentance. But then this other image of the Holy Serpent, the Jews, that comes from Tex Mars, that I found online as well from his book. But I also feel like this is more applicable to the Ophites, the Nassenes, than it really is for the Jews as a whole. Because the Nassenes and the Ophites themselves are Jews, actually. They're paradox Jews. I mean, they're involved in heresy and paganism, but they're Jews nonetheless. So, anyway. Then this is another image of that also comes from the Golden Dawn. And this is after the fall. So it says here, Nathan of Gaza also originated the concept of the infernal abyss. Phil the serpents set out to destroy creation, also in Zoharic terms called Sitra Ahara, or the other side, the world of shells or Cliffoth, situated below the supernovas and the tree of life in which the thoughtless light presides. This clearly refers to the red dragon symbolized of the Golden Dawn, which can be seen in the diagrams the Garden of Eden before and after the fall, from the Practicus and Philosophus grades, respectively. So these images directly come from their different grades of the Golden Dawn, their magical practices. But what I want to point out here, though, is what happens after the fall. So here we have the dragon that now has escaped his enclosure, and it's basically taken Adam and Eve as hostage. So basically, when Eve took the fruit from the serpent, that this Leviathan-like figure took over the world. And here we have the four cherubim, the four living creatures that you see in Ezekiel and Book of Revelation. Then you have this image of God being split apart. So if you remember before, God was depicted as androgynous, right? But here is God, the male version of God, and there's his other half, Shekinah, or Sophia, just kind of, she's got her feathers in his face, saying, well, screw you. So then you have the slant sword, the flaming sword, but it's depicted as sort of very slanted, like that cuts that have cut off everything below him. Looks like so. And then let's see here. And there's another image that comes from the Golden Dawn. This is where the great dragon, again from the floor of the vault of the Adepti. There's the Rose Cross here. But it says here that the Golden Dawn teachings concerning the fall in the Garden of Eden concerns the process which leads to the breaking of the vessels. The diagram of the Garden of Eden after the fall depicts the tree of life in the form of a cross, which contains the seven lowest Sephiroth and Dath, which indicates the center of the cross, at the mercy of the Red Dragon, according to Nathan Gaza. And Nathan Gaza, by the way, was a prophet of a Jewish cult ascribed to Zebediah Levi, and he was kind of like a Antichrist figure. He believed in redemption through sin. But anyway, it says that the only part of the tree of life which is saved from the attacks of the dragon is a supernal, which is symbolized as the great circle because it is protected by the four elemental cherubim and the flaming sword, which God placed there for protection of the garden. According to Nathan, this is the place of the thoughtful light upon the tree of life. And then Tracy Twyman actually wrote about all this in one of her essays called Fake News, Unboxing the Compass. And I wrote here that the original unity and division between God or Yahweh and his bride or consort Asherah are written in detail in my book. And this is what Tracy Twyman wrote about all this. And we're almost done here. But she wrote, the motivation of those trapped below, the demons in hell, are like the Canaanites in the book of the Cave of Treasures, which is to bring those who have usurped them down as well. Before the fall, the subjugated dragon is asleep, dreaming of the day when he will awaken, overcome man, drag his woman down to hell, and penetrate the supernal Eden once again. The Golden Dawn's literature said that this was accomplished by tricking the woman who was supporting this entire tree above her to stoop down to pick up some fruit beneath her. This is what caused the lower part of the tree to fall into the jaws of the waiting dragon heads. The woman clothed with the sun in Revelation also had a dragon waiting to devour her. We are seeing the illustration of those verses in these Golden Dawn diagrams. The sun covering her womb in the supernal Eden is the child Jesus. After the fall, the dragon has devoured it. This happened when Christ descended into Hades, the belly of the beast. That's how it gained the additional eighth head, but I think it was only temporary. Eventually, the tree will be restored again, and the sun will shine on Eden once more, but it's never truly done, or really done. This is the continuous loop connecting the end of the world to the restoration of paradise, the war between God, man, and the devil. So there you have it. And this is also an image of the Hypercube that Tracy Twyman also talks about. A cube within a cube. That we're inside this cube, and this bubble of existence and everything outside this cube is basically chaos, or hell, or spirit realm. And outside of this, who knows? Pleroma, or whatever. But throughout the essay, I talk about other things as well. I talk about Odin, for example, and he's also hung in a tree to gain the secrets of the dead, to create the runes. So he's kind of like Jesus in a way, in that way, where he descends to Hades, or hell, or Hela, realm of Hela. But he's also very, very mercurial as well. He's very much like Hermes or Mercury. He's also crucified again on a tree like Jesus. The runestone where Jesus being hung and Yggdrasil, like Odin. So might as well be Odin, right? But throughout this essay, I mean, I wrote all kinds of stuff. I mean, I also talk about Saint Michael versus Satan, Saint George and the Dragon, Wotan, right, right, the White Horse in Ragnarok. There's Thor and Jormungandr, Marduk and Tiamat. And there's Yahweh Leviathan, Cronus and Uranus. And I'm basically saying that all these different figures, they're kind of saying the same thing, that they're all belong to a family of titans, gods. That and not many of them really have the best intentions for us. And here's a interesting image of Michael, the Leonon Michael. So he's also uh, again the symbol of the demiurge. And then later on in the essay, I mean, I know I'm kind of spoiling things here, but it is what it is. But I mean, I talk about the movie The Matrix and other things like John Keel and his research, and he has some interesting things to say as well. He talks about the ultraterrestrials in the book called The Eighth Tower, but you can definitely check that out. And then he talks about the superspectrum, basically, and that the superspectrum is a layer of reality that exists as a membrane enveloping our physical universe as a resting place for the ultraterrestrials, where all paranormal, supernatural, religious, and cryptozoological phenomenon ultimately springs from. So, in other words, that this superspectrum is God, and that there is no God above it or outside it to save us. So, I know it's kind of depressing to think about, but I mean, there you have it. I'm just reporting the facts as I find it. But you can find more of this essay on my website, theani.com. And as for my book, hopefully that'll be coming out later this spring of this year or summer, just depending on a few other things. Right now, I'm pretty much done with editing the book, but eventually you'll see the fruit of my labor, of what I've been working on for this entire time. So check that essay and check out other videos on my YouTube channel. But I'll also be making more YouTube channel or YouTube videos as well, and I may even wind up uploading some stuff that I did with Tracy as well, and some videos that Tracy Twyman did that have been lost or been deleted offline. But anyway, hope you guys found this as interesting as I did writing. You guys have a good one.